Right, good evening. This meeting of the Barnstable Infrastructure and Energy Committee is being recorded and will be posted for future viewing on the Town of Barnstable website. Under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, anyone else desiring to make such a recording or transmission must notify the chair. Now with that, we do not have a quorum this evening, so we will be deferring the voting of our meeting minutes from the December 9th meeting to our next scheduled meeting unless a quorum is met later this evening. So with that, Barry, I will let you take the agenda from there.
Okay, well, let me just start. I did, while we're not voting on the meeting minutes, I think I noticed something in them that wasn't quite accurate. And so maybe to make it easier for the next meeting, on page 5, under side agreement petition, the very last sentence, it said town council voted that the petition does not have merit, and as such, the agreement will not be reconsidered. So actually it was a tie vote, which means it didn't pass. And this is with regard to the petition to reconsider the town council adoption of the side letter. So what I would suggest changing that, just delete voted that the petition does not have merit and say did not approve the petition instead. And I, ask Kristen, because obviously you were there and part of that.
Yep, that
whether
makes total sense to me, Barry. And I think that's probably just as Chris gets more acclimated with some of the jargon and how we word things, he probably would pick up on that moving forward, but makes total sense. So I am making a note of that as a request in this meeting's minutes, and then I will update the 12/19 or the 12/9 meeting minutes and send those back around to the group.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so that's the minutes. So for old business, for green communities, so there's actually quite a bit to talk about here. So the Department of Energy Resource, basically, I'll do this in a narrative. About a week ago, I talked to Lisa Sullivan, who's the DOER regional rep for Southeastern Massachusetts, and who told me that the DOER back in November had finalized the amendments to the stretch code. I didn't see them. I was checking their website, but they put them in a different place than the proposed regulations. Usually, you put them there, but it's subject to review by the Legislative Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy. Some of the things that DOER does, including things that I worked on back when I was a consultant in the renewable energy space, had to go through this committee. They're expecting it to that it'll pass the review. They'll be able to issue the final regulations in mid-February, about a month from now. But I think from an operational standpoint, it's pretty good to assume that those the final regs will probably still stand. And just as a summary, the whole purpose of these revised regulations were to really address issues that were raised by home builders, building inspectors, and others regarding the stretch code rules pertaining to major additions. So generally, they made the rules more lenient, easier to both probably less likely that the homeowners will need to actually go through the process, but also made the rules more lenient. There were a whole bunch of other changes. There were also a variety of comments that were submitted, and some of the changes really were in response to those comments. It didn't seem to me that there was anything in there that seemed terribly controversial. And as you may recall, the town of Barnstable submitted comments that generally supported the proposed rules. It made a few other suggestions. And then it asked the DOER to update its economic analysis and had a bunch of specific questions or requests. And DOER provided they did update the analysis. It didn't really change the conclusions that if you're installing heat pumps, that for a number of reasons, it actually turns out to be less costly than just doing gas under the base code. That has to do with mass save rebates, and it also has to do with the greater flexibility that a builder or homeowner would have, and because it's a performance standard, not a prescriptive standard like the base code is. And in the analysis shows that while they're meeting the performance standard, they can do that with putting in less energy efficient and less costly windows, as one example. So that, that is in place. And why don't I just stop there and see whether anyone has any questions or comments?
I thought the examples that they gave in the updated analysis were helpful. I still have some questions about how it all works, and I thought it would be very helpful if we had a discussion with a code expert. I think Lisa Sullivan had mentioned that
Yes.
there may be somebody who had more expertise than her on the technical aspects of the code. And I thought maybe a next step would be to see if we could speak to that person or somebody like that who could help us understand all this a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that actually there are a couple of different areas in mind that I think between the economic analysis that we had asked they could be more explicit about their assumptions. I don't know whether they really did that. The stretch code itself, and the other thing is the Cape Light Compact program, because they are in the process of finalizing their new program that is effective for 2025, 26, and 27. And maybe getting someone from Cape Light Compact to explain it. And basically, and I attended a presentation by Maggie Downey, who's the head of that organization, on the 3-year plan and what's different from what they've had before. And generally speaking, really their sole focus at this point is on electrification. They no longer give rebates, for example, to high efficiency gas furnaces. But they're focusing on outreach, and really they've amended their program to be more attractive for middle income and low income people. So that is, that's another area. I think, and while we can answer some of these questions, I'm kind of looking forward to, we've talked before, and Kristen was part of this conversation about setting up a workshop with the town council, and I guess working with the staff and putting that together. Perhaps depending on the timing of that, maybe even an interim just update from the committee as to what is going, what we're working on. This is complex enough my gut is we're talking about a workshop of an hour or more. And so I and then ultimately, if that goes well, that there's an interest in taking up approving the stretch code. I think there is from conversations I've had in the past with Mark Ells and some of the people who work for him, we want to do this in a way that's the most kind of efficient in the use of staff time. So there would need to be those discussions. But Kristen, what's your take? I mean, and just as a predicate to this, I think you very helpfully on the comments on the stretch code regulations, basically met with Mark Ells and Brian Florence, the building inspector, and drafted some comments. And I worked with Brian Florence, who had suggestions on finalizing that, and they were submitted to DOER. So I imagine that this would have to be a collaborative effort. So
I think whatever questions, I mean, I would imagine you all want to have your questions answered so that you have those answers when you sit down with staff, because then you're kind of ready to go. And I'm sure when you meet with staff, there'll be more questions that they might want answered too. But
sure.
I guess I mean, you would know probably, Barry, how much will staff be presenting and will your committee be presenting? Because I do think it will be co-presented, but where do you think that like the expertise lies in that presentation?
Yeah, and some of it would be staff, and some of it would be and David Anthony, I think, would be part of that. And it may require getting outside people, and DOER has volunteered to help. But maybe a good way of dealing with this is just summarizing some of the areas that I think probably would you want to address in a workshop. So one is what is this Green Communities program? There are 5 criteria. The stretch code is really, I think, the key one. But what are the potential benefits the town gets? There's an initial grant and subsequent one. I mean, if there were some information about what are the specific town projects that could end up being the subjects of the grants, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars here, so give you a sense of the magnitude. How does this work? So this whole program. So basically the building codes are in a 3-year cycle, and they get revised. You have the base code, you have the stretch code, and then there's one even beyond that, the specialized code. And I don't think, given where we're at, all the other towns in the Cape have adopted the stretch code. Some have also gone beyond that and adopted the specialized code. I think for where we're at, we're talking about just the stretch code. So basically the town council would to get the benefits from the Green Communities program would have to adopt the stretch code. If at some time in the future the town says, hey, we don't like this, we want to go back to the base code, they can do that, but they would no longer be part of the Green Communities program. I think one of the issues that came up last time is that this was a decision that couldn't be reversed. That's actually not true. So so that's how it works. These codes are evolving, and I guess over time they've actually gotten to be more similar to each other. In other words, there's probably less differentiation, but there was, because of legislation that was passed over the last couple of years, the focus has turned from energy of the stretch code as well as mass save has changed from energy efficiency to decarbonization and essentially electrification. And the program is sort of geared to make it easier to basically to go with heat pumps instead of gas. And so the program was amended to actually make the standard, if you're using heat pumps, more lenient. And it's all the mass save programs are also have been refocused on for heat pumps and electrification. So that's one thing. The other thing that's different is there's before it just applied to new construction. New construction, I think the numbers were like 50 houses per year, something in that magnitude. And to house remodels. Now these, having been through one myself, I did an additional room and I've refinished the basement. It wouldn't be covered by these rules. So I think there would probably be a relatively small number of houses that would be. So that's different. And the changes to the rules were in response to concerns about really applying to home remodels. So the rules were made more lenient. And the Home Builders Association, based on a conversation I had with them, their consultant a while ago, they were satisfied with the rules as were proposed. And I assume I could check they're satisfied with the rules as finalized. But so that, I know that gives you some overview, and maybe I had to go back to, what should we focus on in the workshop? How this interacts with the mass save programs. So probably someone from Cape Light Compact, I think, would be good. The whole premise of this has kind of changed. So it's really tied with the state legislation focusing on reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So I thought, Chris Loninger, who's kind of an expert in the field and communicating this, would be good to have a short presentation on that. And the sort of the practical view from home builders, we can get people. I have a conversation set up for tomorrow with Bob Riley of Habitat for Humanity, who's obviously built a bunch of units that under the stretch code and is pretty familiar with it. But there may be others, and Brian Florence may have a suggestion. The guy that he suggested, I don't know whether he would testify publicly, but we may get somebody else. I guess the last thing that was worth covering is sort of the health aspect of this. So basically, this is pushing people from going from gas to electric heating, and so there are also ventilation requirements. I don't know if ultimately they make a difference from a health standpoint, but I think going from gas to electric does, and a potential safety issue as well. So I think I've asked Jane to talk to that. She's a doctor concerned about public health. So I think between staff and committee members and outside people, we would have the requisite people to address questions and provide a presentation.
And also the other thing is, really, we're the only town that doesn't follow these rules at this time, correct?
We are in Cape Cod, yeah.
So as far as the day in and day out impact, I'm assuming there's some impact to the town as far as building codes and regulations. That's Brian Florence's end of things. And then the other thing is the impact on, say, a builder. But in theory, unless they're only building in the town of Barnstable, they probably already have some working knowledge of what's
Oh,
going
yeah.
on because they're building to the left and right of us.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it sounds like you have it covered.
Right.
And it, we're not like the guinea pig in this. We're kind
Yeah.
of we're the late adopters for one thing in the town of Barnstable.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this in my own career because in a different area, I worked for a company where I was doing the primary guy doing the governmental relations stuff. And our executives decided to oppose part of the Massachusetts electricity restructuring legislation that had a requirement basically having renewable energy content. And I remember we'd have to have additional staff, be more work or whatever, and we were concerned about how it'd be implemented. And it turns out we ended up it was implemented well. It became a business opportunity for us. So a lot of times you look at things that are new and look at them pretty negatively, and and then you just adjust to it, and it often can be a plus. So that's kind of the thought. I was thinking, Kristen, that in my experience, just setting this up and having all the discussions takes time. And so we pretty much know the direction. And I guess I've been thinking about this, the timing. Well, let's say they do finalize the rules in February. I'm thinking about having the workshop in either late March or maybe first part of April. But to do that, I guess to have discussion, with the president or vice president of the town council and Mark Ells, and so it seems to me to start the discussion, but not have the workshop for basically a couple of months, 2 to 3
How
months.
soon after the finalized regulations do you think you need time to like get everything that you would want? Like the only reason I'm thinking is because I think the sooner the better, because don't forget, we start to get into the budget season and things get really busy again.
Yeah,
Then we have less meetings. So I'm thinking the sooner you do it, the better.
yeah,
And I'm assuming that you'd want to give the presentation, have the chance for questions, and then bring, I'm assuming there needs to be a resolve of some sort for the adoption of the green communities. I mean, I don't know if you'd want to have it adopted that evening. So I think you could talk with Craig and see, Craig and town manager Ells and see what they say. Whether it's going to be adopted on that night or whether we say, listen, this is the workshop and, we're going to be bringing forth a resolve and that will be at the next meeting.
Yeah.
And that gives people time to ask any questions between that meeting and the next meeting.
yeah. I was thinking that, and this is complex. So I was thinking that to have the workshop and have it maybe as a resolve for either the following meeting or the meeting after that.
Yeah, just
I'll
don't
have
give
to-
us too much time because what happens is people start, this has been my experience. We bring
Okay.
something up and then we like rehash it and then we get busy and it gets put aside, or I mean, it's kind of like the public roads workshop that we've had 5 times and we're not much further forward 5 times later. So I just think you should strike while the iron's hot and information is fresh.
Okay. You think maybe the next
Yeah, I think, you give people 2 weeks, and if there's not enough time, you can
Yeah.
always put it to the
Okay.
following 2 weeks, but I wouldn't wait too much time because I think
Right.
it makes people kind of get their acts together and, we have 2 weeks to ask the questions. And again, if we have more questions, I'm sure you'll be there the following 2 weeks later, to answer any questions. But I think if, people have the time, then you presented the information. I'm sure we'll ask some questions on the day and we should kind of get things going because it's been this long since the last time it went around. You know, I don't know that 2 weeks is gonna give us anything different. I think we should just kind of, I think we need to, while the information is fresh in our brains,
Okay,
get to it.
okay, that's good feedback.
Yeah.
So you think I should contact Craig directly, or
I mean, I don't think we have an agenda setting meeting for a couple of weeks, where
Yeah.
I would say I would ask him on Wednesday, but I don't think we have one for 2 more weeks because the calendar's kind of messed up in January.
yeah,
So, I would drop him an email. You could include me and then town manager
okay,
Elson,
I'm sorry, who?
to Craig Tamish.
Yeah,
Yep, and to town manager Elson, just include me, and then, you know, just say you'd like to, you know, to discuss getting a workshop onto the schedule. I would say approximately how long you think you'd like for time.
yeah,
And just explain the regulations are gonna come out February 15th. And, you know, we'd like to get on the schedule. I'm just trying to look, let's see when the schedule is. So that would be then, I think it's the 20th.
so there's one other thing I ought to tell you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm gonna be out of town from February 20th, and I'm coming back, I think, March 8th or 9th. So, and that kind of also, you know, I think what, March 20th is the next meeting, or,
So there's one on February 27th.
I'll be
I'm
out,
just looking, yeah, I'm just looking after the regulations are finalized.
yeah,
And then we have the 6th of March. And then it will be the 20th of March.
right.
So what, you think the 20th of March?
Yeah, March 20th, or if not, the following one was what, April 3rd? April,
April 3rd.
yeah,
Yeah, you really want to get it done before May.
got it. That's very helpful.
Budget starts, so.
See, this is why I was asking you whether you could attend this meeting, because you provide a lot of value for stuff like this.
Oh, thank
So,
you. Well, I do my best.
okay,
And if I don't know, I'll ask.
okay. All right, so just, you know, I did hear a presentation, it was the Cape Cod Collaborative, another group, Climate Change Collaborative, who organized this. But the administrator of the Cape Light Compact gave the presentation on the new Mass Save program. And I think it would be helpful not only for this, but for us and organize, see if I could get her or someone on her staff to make a similar presentation to our group for our next meeting. And I will, you know, the plan is to work with Jane and Chris, neither of whom are on this call, but I'll do that, follow up, because I see them doing parts of this that I think is probably pretty unique to them. So I'll do that. And I think that, you know, I'll probably reach out to David Anthony and Brian Florence, to let them know what's going on as well. Those are the two key staff members that I would see would be part of this workshop. And you know, you may get some different perspectives, but you know, that's fine. And I think, you know, the job of this workshop is putting together information that the town council can use in making a decision. So
Sounds good to me.
okay. Anything else on this, or?
It sounds like a good plan.
Okay,
We have a June deadline. The next deadline for submitting an application is in June. I mean, I think if we don't, or I guess if we don't complete our Green Communities application by
Right.
June, then we'd have to wait till the following December or January.
Right, yeah, they accept
So-
applications on a 6-month
Yeah.
basis. So,
So
And
if
out of
we-
curiosity, how bad, that's such a negative word. How complicated is that application? That's probably a better word to use.
it's,
Yeah.
so the issue is if you have the data, it's not that complicated, but getting the data is. So I think this is what I understand Sean Hogan has been working at. This has to do with another part of it, which is a plan to reduce town energy use by 20% over a period of time. So, but I understand that that's something that he's been working on, not for this purpose, but it'd be helpful. But I can follow up on stuff like that.
And if the town does not reduce their energy consumption by 20% by that date, do we have to give money back? We get a fine, we get thrown in jail?
I
No,
think
just kidding.
it's having a reasonable plan to do it. I haven't heard of anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question.
It is a good question.
So and I'm told that if the so it may be that the microgrid project itself may satisfy this. So but DOER is they're not out there to try to deny people's applications. Let me put it that way.
So whatever the application process requires, I'm hoping that you're all working on that like kind of now, so that it's not like you're on the last minute trying to get that done and that's a problem, right? You'll be
I've
ready to
had
go
discussion.
for June.
Yeah, so here's the tension here. I've had discussions with David Anthony and over time, and I guess to a lesser extent Sean Hogan. So they feel things are all doable, but they are reluctant, for good reason, about doing work that may not be required, because there's a lot of things for them to do. So, but anyways, yeah, I'll be in touch.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. I know we have next food waste, but before we get to that, and this is more of a process issue, and maybe I'll address this partly to Kelly. So, as we move forward, particularly planning this workshop and just for other things, it's good to have a to-do list. And I think at the last meeting we had to say, yeah, let's have a to-do list and put it in the minutes. But a lot of times we don't get the minutes, until right before the next meeting, which is fine for minutes. But I'm used to, getting somewhat older. By the time the minutes come out, I will have forgotten what I said I would do at the last meeting. So, so I wonder in this process, either I guess we can include them in the minutes and get them out more promptly, or just can circulate a to-do list. Barry said he would do this. John said he would do this. And I think that would help us be more effective as a committee. So maybe Kelly, if I could ask you what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, sorry, I had my camera off as I was doing some other stuff. I think part of it, this meeting in particular, was the handoff between Chris and I. He had submitted some things, but then I'd asked him where the minutes were, and he was like, I guess they were
Oh,
still.
yeah, no problem. It's not an issue about the last minutes. I mean, just going forward.
Yeah, no. So I think going forward, I think you're exactly right. I will work to get the minutes turned around much quicker. I think prior to what we were doing, just kind of talking out loud, is because we typically have 2, sometimes 3 weeks in between meetings.
Right.
My fear was always that people would get the email, a day or 2 after the meeting and then forget to review them. So I think a couple things. One, a summary of action items, because I noticed that's part of the meeting minutes now. I can send that out following the meeting because obviously we'll be talking about them in the meeting. So it's easy to send that out. Send the meeting minutes out within 48 hours, I think is a reasonable goal too. And then I typically do send a reminder email the day of the meeting, but I can work on doing that, you know, a week prior or whatever increment you think is most appropriate. Maybe it's a week prior if we have a 3-week meeting time frame, and then still a day of reminder as well. I'm open to whatever works best for you
Yeah,
guys.
so here's if you could get, so I'll leave it up to you. So either you could circulate the minutes with the to-do list within 48 hours, or
Yep.
you could separately just circulate the to-do list and then incorporate them into the minutes, which you can do at a later date, because the is whatever, and I assume either, you know, it'd be proper within the rules because you're including them in the minutes. But the to-do list is more time critical.
Yep, I noticed that Chris had that in the last meeting minutes. He has them sort of as, I think they're called assigned tasks. That's what you're talking about, Barry?
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, I'm fine. I mean, I can submit that within 24 hours to everyone, send that around 48 hours. I think 24 is fine because we'll be talking about it at the meeting. So it's me just summarizing them, making them look good, and then sending them out. And then we can send the meeting minutes in a more timely fashion as well, and the reminder. So I will make sure that we get those assigned tasks out to everyone, you know, within 24 to 48 hours. For sure.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. My response is sold. So,
Sounds good.
all right. All right. So with that, let's go over to food waste and John. I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, okay. So I think our next step is, Barry, you and I are going to spend a morning or an afternoon at the transfer station talking to users in the recycling area and to get their understanding, get their thoughts about food waste, try to understand if there are any impediments or reasons that people are not doing this that we might be able to address with the. And we're thinking this could be sort of useful in developing our communication plan. So I think what the key would be to have a day with halfway decent weather. You think, I don't, and the rest of this week maybe isn't looking so great. Do you think that this coming week might be a time for us to
I
do
was
that?
looking at the weather report. It's going to be below 40 degrees for the rest of the month. It looked like. So, yeah, I mean, as much as I would fond of doing, you know, probably managing and composting food waste, I probably in 30-degree weather would not stop to talk to you. So, you know, maybe just give a summary of there was a considerable back and forth between John and I and Tracy, the Ruggiero, the supervisor, and yeah, but I think part of what we would be doing is handing out, explaining to people, you know, here over there is the where they're collecting food waste, and the reason we're doing it, and do you have a green, you know, bin for composting, and if not, you know, we could give them along with the compostable bags. And I guess we'd have to take their information. I don't want to give more than one to the same person, but that we kind of went from doing a survey to doing something that was kind of, I guess, simpler. And is that a fair summary, John?
It is, yes. I mean, we actually started down the road of working on a survey. Actually had a draft of a survey that we were discussing. But as we thought about it and worked on it, we decided that we would get more useful information trying to engage people in conversation. I think a lot of people are sort of run away when they get asked for a survey because it happens so often these days. So that's where we came out on that.
Yeah. So I think where it was left is when we, you know, get our specifics set, and the timing will, get in touch with the staff at the transfer station, and they'll arrange it. And give us, I guess, some official looking jackets.
That we're gonna get, well, I think we want to wear safety vests. We don't want to get,
Safety vests, yes.
we want to be, I mean, where people are pulling in and out in a hurry there. So
That will look sort of official. Okay.
yes, yeah.
Either that, you guys could all dress up as Oscar the Grouch and get people's attention.
I like that idea.
That would be I'll see what I can find in the Halloween closet.
Oscar the Grouch giving out free composting things. Okay.
Yeah.
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 All right.
No, I think it will be interesting. I mean, part of the goal is just to promote this by talking to people and trying to explain to people what the benefits are. But I think whenever you have a conversation, you learn something. So
Yeah.
I think it'll be useful, good use of time.
Okay.
And so as far as other things going on, are you ready to move away to the sort of the other things?
No, Kristen raised her hand. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I do actually have a question because we
Yeah.
just appropriated money for, I think it was like $5,700, and it talked about recycling and whatnot.
Right.
And Counselor Lubke was talking about the composting. And so because I don't compost at the dump, that composting is actually sent to a pig farmer. Is that true?
The turkey farm, I think. Yeah.
Oh, a turkey farm.
Yeah.
Here on the Cape?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, she didn't know that. I think she thought that, and I also thought that compost would be mixed in with our leaves and whatnot composting in part of that whole composting process. So I just give you that feedback that somebody who uses the composting had no idea what happens to the compost. So just as feedback that she kind of was like inquisitive and kind of caught off guard. So just for what that's worth.
It's good feedback. Yeah.
I was gonna say, to add to that, I don't know if we want to talk about this now, John, but I know Chris was working on a few items for you. So taking off my support role hat and putting on my communications manager hat, one of the things we had talked about was some video assets to help with education like that, Counselor. And I did speak with Sarah Beal, who manages some of the Barnstable podcasts and essentially the Barnstable Government Access channel. And they were working on sort of laying out their editorial calendar for their town talks. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, John, but town talks are sort of a short format video series. And I did suggest that we have a session with you and Tracy Rogazio from Salt. And if you're not comfortable, John, you can appoint someone else. But essentially, Tracy to talk about solid waste and the program that's available at the transfer station, and then either you, John, or whoever is comfortable to talk about sort of the end user's perspective on why composting is so important. So I think Tracy can probably get into some of those details to help educate folks about how it works, where it goes, where you get your buckets, what the program's really like. And then my thought was having someone like you, John, who can talk about the feel good message behind it, why it's important, what the goal is potentially from the committee's standpoint on increasing adoption. So Sarah is going to work on that editorial calendar and suggesting some dates. Usually what she does is give a list of dates and times, and then you pick something that works for your schedule, and you go and you film in the studio.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, I thought that was a really nice, great first step. And then I know I kind of alluded to some of the things Chris and I are working on from a DPW communication standpoint, but one of them is revamping our web presence. And I'll sort of leave it at that because there's a lot of different sort of politics behind how we're going to make that happen. But essentially, we're going to build out much more robust content for all of the different services and functions we provide. So there will be an opportunity for an enhanced web presence too on the solid waste side for composting.
Yeah. And the other in regards to the communication plan, the other part that I wanted to discuss more was signage.
Yeah.
Because my view is that we need at least better signage to identify the location of the food waste shack. But I think I guess maybe that issue is a little more complicated. But I want to make sure we're discussing that as part of the communication plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that when I was reviewing past meeting minutes, and I saw some of the conversations with Tracy. So I can follow up with him. We have a staff call tomorrow morning. I'll follow up with him sort of offline on that. And if it's something that needs to come out of my communications budget because of whatever reasoning, then I'll make sure that we work on getting a path forward for that. Because
Good.
that's an easy win.
Yeah, it seemed to me that that was a fairly easy first step. I mean, what I would propose is that we have a sign that not only directs people to the location, but also goes into some of the reasons why this is so beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think on that note, I know there was a pamphlet that was created by some of the town communication staff at one point. I think we had
Yes,
talked
yes.
about potentially revising that or even sort of rebranding it. So that's
Mhm.
something that we can look at doing as well. And then as I noted, having more of this video educational content, having additional, I know we talked about social media content, putting content in e-news. Those are all things Chris and I discussed. So between the two of him, we'll start fleshing some of that out with Tracy now that I'm back.
That's great. Yeah, that sounds like some great steps. I was going to say great first steps, but those are great steps overall.
That's great, and we have an excellent leading man for the video here in John.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I like the idea of being able to film it, and then put it out there as opposed to doing it live. So
Yes, and you can take
takes a little.
multiple takes. They'll edit it. They do a fantastic job. I've filmed a couple of them, and I've filmed
Yeah,
them with engineers who don't typically love to speak
yeah.
publicly, and it always ends up being a great finished product. So I think it'll be, and it's evergreen content that we can push out in multiple ways. So that's why I was really pushing to get some video content, and I think that's a great first piece to work on.
Good. Just
Okay.
one last
Okay, go
thing
ahead.
on food waste. I sent an email earlier today to Carrie Parcell to ask about the status of the project to set up a composting facility on Joint Base Cape Cod. She has the county, I guess, has gotten funding and retained a consultant to do a feasibility study, which was expected to come out this month. And I think that maybe that will provide some good guidance for a countywide effort to promote food waste collection. That's all I have on food waste.
We're good. I'm glad we seem to be making good progress in this area. So make more going forward. Okay. Well, for the next item on our agenda, usually we refer to Chris on this climate change and climate science, but Chris is not here. But I will just say one thing. So 50 years ago, I worked for a consulting firm, and I worked in one of the early climate change studies, but haven't really worked in that field since. But I read a good book, The Physics of Climate Change by Lawrence M. Krauss, which is in less than 200 pages, just the science of it and how it developed over time. And it's for laymen. So if you're interested in that, and in less than 200 pages, it was a pretty good read. So does anyone have anything else on climate change and climate science? Okay, if not, the next, we have air quality monitoring. I think this related to the problems in the elementary school. And Jane was giving a report. I don't know whether we should, well, Jane's not here, but I suggest maybe we'll keep it on the agenda one more time and see whether this is something that's going to really be a continuing item.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Okay. I'd be interested. We want to make sure we get Jane's thought on that.
Yeah, exactly. So we ought to wait until she's here.
Yeah.
So. New business, additional updates from the committee chair. I don't think I have any. So if anyone else has anything, no. So discuss the agenda for the next meeting. We can use this basically the same agenda. I think with the green communities, we'll be following up in terms of a workshop on the stretch code where that stands, and the DOER finalization of the stretch code rules. Any other thoughts on that? No. All right, assigned tasks. Okay, this is the rubber meets the road. So Tracy, do you let's kind of go over what we've already talked about and see if there's anything else. So I said I would, so I'm going to talk to Bob Riley about the stretch code tomorrow. I've set that up. And by the way, I've also talked to Judith Holt, who was involved in the town of Sandwich adoption of the stretch code. She's basically an energy efficiency and design person for residential and institutional buildings. So, but I will follow with Bob Riley. I will contact the Cape Light Compact, see if they could maybe for our next meeting present on the new Mass Save program. I will follow up with Craig Tamish and Mark Ells about planning for a workshop. That I'll copy Kristen. And I'll be in touch with DOER regarding a stretch code specialist and just other things relating to the stretch code. I'll be in touch with Brian Florence and Dave Anthony. All right, that's what I can remember. How am I doing, Kelly?
It seems unfair. It seems you've got all the to-do items.
I was
Well,
just looking back. I think that makes sense. And then I know you also wanted to sort of start laying out a plan for the workshop as well, but I think that will probably come following some of those conversations.
Yeah, and with that,
And I feel like, sorry to interrupt you, Barry, but did Jane, and I could be misremembering because it was at the end of my pregnancy, but did Jane offer to sort of help with this with you? Because I know it was a lot on your plate and you were looking for some additional support, because maybe there's even like a separate, I don't know how this works, the committee, but like you two have a separate working group or something to work out an outline for a workshop so that it's not.
yeah, so both Jane and Chris I've had discussions with, and I believe Chris at the last meeting and Jane both at the meeting and then subsequent. So have Jane focus on the health aspect of this and have Chris focus on the, how this relates to climate change.
Perfect. Yep.
And I think it's great that we have members in the committee who've got expertise in the area. So it's yeah. Then I'll follow up with them as well. John, and in terms of food waste, I guess the items are on John's list. So, and at least this shows me that my short-term memory is okay. It's just probably the longer-term memory that is more questionable. But John, go ahead. Maybe if you could summarize what your understanding is of your to-do list.
Of my to-do list. So are we deciding that we're going to defer the transfer station interviewing data collection process until the weather warms up, or do you still want to try to get out there before the next meeting?
I was hoping there'd be a break in the weather.
Yeah.
But sort of my analogy is to I'm a golfer, so if generally I want it to be 50 degrees or more. And I think for this, maybe 40 degrees or more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kristen?
I might make a suggestion that you maybe, I don't know if any of you are, Facebook or Nextdoor users. But you might want to like put a little post on Facebook or Nextdoor. And just ask people what they think about composting at the town. I mean, you could just put the questions out there and see what you get. So, or, I could reach out to somebody. If you gave me the questions, I could reach out to, one or two people and have them post it just to kind of get a feel for the traffic, because people that are on those kinds of things like to talk. And, you might just gain some information. I don't know if the town would put that out on their Facebook, so I don't really know how that works, but
I was
yeah,
gonna say,
Kelly.
I can talk to Lynn about that. I mean, everything we do currently is on the town page, which obviously makes sense. I know we've talked about potentially having a separate social media presence to allow for more content sharing, so we'll see how that develops. But I don't see why that would be an issue, or maybe even creating a survey that we can link to in e-news. I can speak with Lynn about that. Nextdoor is not archivable, which for the town to be present on social media, the social media sites have to be able to be archived. So that's one of the reasons why we don't, as a town, use it Nextdoor. But Councillor Turkelson is right. I mean, people really do talk there. So it would be worth potentially doing that. And I mean, I have an account. I'm more of just like a lurker. I like to see what's being said. And I don't necessarily want people knowing my role, because I don't want them to, not say the truth and how they're feeling, because it makes me better at my job if I know their honest opinions. But I mean, there are ways like we can get it posted on Nextdoor. But I'll certainly talk with Lynn and her team about something on the town Facebook, and then potentially a survey link or something if we want to go in that direction through e-news and the town app as well. We can use that.
John, you have any thoughts on that, or?
It sounds like a good idea. Would it be helpful for me to send you some potential survey questions?
Yeah, that would be great, John.
Okay, so that's item 1 on my to-do list. Then, a small, another thing, I'm going to continue to follow up concerning the potential for a composting facility at the joint base. And then after that, is there anything, Kelly, that I can do this week or next week in terms of other aspects of the communication plan?
I don't think so off the top of my head, but let me review where we left off. And I know Chris tried to move the ball a bit on some of these. So I'll sort of follow up with him and see. Maybe in terms of signage, if you're going to draft some potential survey questions for me, if there's a couple messaging points you want to put together on what you'd like to see on signage, that would be helpful, because I can come up with it, but you might have things that you feel are more important or will add more value. So that gives me something to work with as well.
Sure, I think that could have the messaging points would have applicability in a bunch of different, I think for all aspects of the communication plan. So I'd be happy to do that as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then I know I owe just kind of pushing Sarah on the timing for filming a town talk. So I will follow up with her, because once you do have that scheduled, typically they ask you to submit the questions you want to be asked, or your talking points so that they can formulate questions. So I'm sure a lot of this prep work that you're doing now will be applicable there as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, John.
All right.
Does anyone have anything else for the good of the cause here? With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Okay.
Well, actually, we never really started. I don't know if we have to. We can't. We're stuck. We can't vote to adjourn because we don't have a quorum. So we have to say
that's right, because we never.
Yeah,
John, that's very
so
very astute of you. Okay.
I'd like to feel I contributed something.
No, you contributed. All right. And the way I look at this, we have the meetings planned for an hour and a half, and we're an hour and 10 minutes in it, and I think we're done.